Shavuot is a unique and unusual holiday on the Jewish calendar, in the sense that on the one hand, we may say that perhaps it's our most important and significant Chag. It commemorates and celebrates Matan Torah, which is the day that we received the Torah, the day that was so monumental and life-altering that it forever impacted the Jewish people. We know that Torah is our life. It's a tree of life. It's what guides us. It's what sustains us. It's what we hold on to. And yet, on the other hand, this holiday is so much shorter than a lot of our other chagim, and it's also bereft of any special mitzvot that are associated with it. And I think this is really stands out in terms of something that makes Shavuot different than, let's say, Rosh Hashanah, where we feature the shofar so prominently. We have Sukkot, where the sukkah and the daled minim. We have Pesach with the matzah, the maror, the daled kosot, the mitzvah of Sipar Yetziat Mitzrayim. And then we come to Shavuot, which, while certainly it has many minhagim, staying up and learning Torah all night, eating dairy food, decorating our Batei Knesset so beautifully with flowers and greenery, the day itself lacks any mitzvot hayom. And the mitzvah of a holiday are certainly so essential, usually in giving the holiday its essential character. And it's what helps us focus in on the key kinds of elements of the Chag and what we're supposed to take from it. So what then is the essence of the Chag of Shavuot? What is it all about, and where should our focus be? I think that if I took a random survey, people walking on the street, and asked, what is the focus of Shavuot? Where should our mind be when we're thinking about this holiday? We would probably get answers connected to spirituality, right? Spiritual goals, learning Torah, forging a connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And yet, what is so surprising, even shocking in a way, is that the Gemara in Pesachim takes an almost opposite approach. The Gemara tells us in source number 1 that Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ein lo la'adam b'yom tov ela o ochol v'shoteh o yoshev v'shoneh. That a person should spend his yantiv, should spend his chag either eating and drinking or sitting and learning. Rabbi Yeshua Omer chalkeu chetzio la'achila v'shtiyah v'chetzio l'bein hamidrash. No, he should split his time either eating and drinking or sitting and learning, but he should involve both of those. Rabbi Yochanan comes to tell us that actually both of them are darshaning the same psukim. There's a pasuk that tells us Asar LaHashem Elokecha, that our holidays should be kind of devoted to God, and there's another pasuk that tells us Asar Tiyah Lachem, that they should be kind of revolving around our worldly pursuits. Rabbi Eliezer Savar Oku LaHashem Oku Lachem. They disagree about how to interpret these psukim. Rabbi Eliezer thinks we have two aspects. We have the God aspect and the human aspect. So some holidays we should devote totally to God, and some totally to more human endeavor. But Rabbi Yeshua thinks Kol Kehu. No, every holiday should be Chetzi LaHashem V'Chetzi Lachem. Amar Rabbi Elazar, but Hakol Modin, but everybody agrees that the Atzeret on Shavuot itself, Tiba'ina Nami Lachem, that on Shavuot itself, the element of Lachem, of eating and drinking, must be present. On that Shavuot, half the day we must spend engaging in activities such as eating and drinking. My time, that the Gemara says, why specifically on Shavuot is this so important? And it answers because Yom Shenitna Bo Torah, because that's the day that we were given Torah. So strange, so surprising. We would think on the day that Torah was given, we should be devoting ourselves entirely to Hashem, to the study of Torah, to tefillah, to spiritual pursuits. And yet, the Gemara here comes to tell us a key idea, I think, in our Jewish philosophy, the core of our Judaism, that as opposed to many religions where it is believed and taught that the way to achieve holiness is by depriving ourselves of the pleasure of this world and by denying our physical drives and our physical needs so that we could perhaps maybe experience the spiritual side of ourselves, our souls more. Judaism doesn't believe this. Torah is meant to be kept in a physical world, in a human reality, and the fact that Shavuot is the Yom Shenitna B'Torah is exactly what dictates to us that it has to be spent Chetzi LaHashem. Rav Amital, one of the founding Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Har Etzion, was fond of quoting a a drash of the Kutzker Rebbe, which I have for you in Hebrew. He says that it's well known that the Kutzker Rebbe used to darsh in the pasuk V'anshe kodesh chiyun li, that people of holiness you should be for me, people of holiness. The Kadosh Baruch Hu yesh melachim b'shefar, Rav Untitled would say. He would say God has plenty of angels. He has enough. Hu lo ratzeh sheniyeh melachim. He doesn't want us to be angels. Ela sheniyeh anashim. He wants us to be people. He wants us to be human. Asor lanu la'abed et hatchushot hanashiyot. We can't forget about our human emotions. We can't deny them. And then he goes on to say that yesh anashim shemenasim lihitzalem mitchushot sa'ar. Sometimes there are people who try to ignore their, let's say, human pain. And he says, for example, im koreh lehem ason chalila, if tragedy strikes and somebody close to them is niftar, passes away, they may try to suppress the tsa'ar, the pain that they're feeling, and to find all kinds of positive ways to explain what happens. Kagon lo marsha devar ho'il la'am Yisrael, maybe it has some national significance. Zoe hitna'agu psula l'chalutin. Strong language Rav Amital uses. He says that this approach, he says, is absolutely wrong-headed behavior. HaTorah eino ratzeh shenidchet tchushotenu, ela shenavod et Hashem mitoch hatkusha hativit shelanu. God, the Torah, wants us to worship Hashem from our natural feelings and emotions and instincts. As a side note, I'll just say that a few weeks ago on Leil Yom HaZikaron, Ophir and Bakalim Shire, the parents of Gilad Shire, who was murdered, it's already 5 summers ago, wow, at this point, came to the yeshiva to speak on Leil Yom HaZikaron, and Gilad's father shared that during the course of their shiva, many important rabbis and dignitaries visited them and tried to give national meaning to their son's murder and death, and to say that he was a martyr, and to explain that he has a special place in Shemayim. And he said that when Rav Lichtenstein came in, the fact that he just shared his pain as a father of the loss of just a regular 17-year-old son is what was most significant and most meaningful to him. And I think that's the point that Rav Amital is making here, that Torah is meant for humans. It's meant for us to experience from a place of human nature. This is what the Gemara in Shabbos in source number 3 tells us explicitly, that Torah was never meant for angels. I was just reading my daughter a story last night called The Very Best Gift, about the giving of the Torah and her Shavuot, and in there was this midrash that the Gemara brings here, where Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to get the luchot, and the angels say, what's this child of woman doing here? Like, Torah is meant for the heavens. Torah, it represents the grandeur of God. Why would you give it to people? In the second paragraph, God says to Moshe, answer them. And Moshe turns and he says to the angels, Torah she'ata noten li machtiva, anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzicha me'eretz Mitzrayim. Amar lehem, the Mitzrayim yiradatem, the Paro hishabatem, Torah lama tehei lachem. That he says, he turns to the angels and he says, the Torah talks about the fact that we were slaves in Egypt and we were freed. Did you go down to Egypt? The Torah talks about the fact that we need to keep Shabbos and we have to make it holy. Do you work all week that you need a day of rest at the end of the week? The Torah talks about kaved avicha ve'edinecha. Do you have parents to honor? The Torah talks about lo tirtzaf or lo tinaf. Do you feel jealousy? Do you have a yetzer hara? And at that point, the angels are modeh that indeed the Torah was not meant for them. Torah is not meant for angels. It's meant for humankind to keep here. The Beit HaLevi, Rabbi Yosef Levi Soloveitchik, the great-grandfather of the Rav Soloveitchik, that we speak so frequently about, makes the point that this entire episode is recorded here in the Gemara to teach us the idea that Torah is not meant for the heavenly spheres. It is not meant for the angels. But rather the goal is to see how we can carry out Hashem's will and His laws right down here. How can we sanctify our human experience? The Meshech Chochmah in source number 4 also talks about this concept beautifully when he says in his first paragraph that the Deracheha philosophim, he says, there are philosophers out there who think that the way that we achieve shleimut, the way that we achieve perfection in life is by doing our best to somehow think deeply on an intellectual level and connect our intellect to the thoughts and the experiences of God. And in the second paragraph in the bold, he says that can't be so, because he ends the first paragraph by saying, if that was true, then lama lehem chayim, then why did God give us life? Our physical bodies, they just separate us, or they just create a barrier, they just get in the way. So he goes on to say that kasher yasu kol chukei olam mehaviyotav al pi chukei Torah hakdosha kacha yinagu b'olam ha'maaseh. That the point is to take this world and to try to interact with it al pi chukei Torah hakdosha, according to God's will. Im kasher yagbiru b'chiratam al chukei hatava, if we manage to somehow be mitgaber, to rise above the natural feelings that we have, misibat ratzon Hashem yiparach, because of the laws that Hashem has given us, az yavo lehem hashleimut hamiti, then we will feel that we have reached some kind of level of perfection. I think the Meshech Chochmah is Dafka saying here, we should be attentive, we should acknowledge, we should admit that we have human feelings, we have human drives, we have human emotions, we have instincts, and yet can we take all that and still submit to God's will? Can we take all the things that we feel and still say, but sometimes God wants something else of us? That ability to kind of struggle and take our human emotions and channel them to God's will, that is where we achieve perfection. It reminds me of many years ago, I was on a panel in a school setting with colleagues where one of the students asked us, what's a halacha that you struggle with? Can you share something that causes you tension? And I'm sitting there thinking, what am I going to choose from? Because we all have, I think, those halachot that are difficult for us to understand or to reconcile, sometimes with our Western sensibilities or with our human instincts. And one of my colleagues, who answered first, said, what do you mean there's no such thing? If it's Ratzon Hashem, then I feel no conflict. And I said, well, in a way, there's something about that answer that may sound like an ideal, right? We say in Pirkei Avot, Oser Ritzono Kertzoncha, that we should make God's will our will. Rav Lichtenstein comments here in a very, I think, sharp, poignant quote that yes, we ultimately submit to God's will, but the intention was never that we should deny or suppress or not acknowledge that we may sometimes feel differently. Found this quote in an interview, it was originally in Hebrew, that was conducted with Rav Lichtenstein about 8 years ago, where he says that there are those Chachmei Musar that want a person to go to sacrifice his son as if he was sacrificing a chicken. He's talking here about the Akedah. He says, I do not think like this. I do not understand one who thinks like this, and I have not the slightest doubt that the Torah, Chazal, and our medieval scholars do not see it this way. I do not see this as an ideal. I do not yearn to be like this. I do not yearn for my children to be like this, not for my students to be like this, not for my neighbors to be like this, and not for the Jewish nation to be like this. Moreover, I do not see in this greatness. Were I to believe that our forefather Abraham related to the Akedah as if he were slaughtering a chicken, I would not revere him more. I would revere him less. This we don't need. We have many people that can slaughter a chicken. Meaning Rav Aaron here is making the point that Kedusha comes not from denying our humanity, but rather from channeling our corporality to a higher purpose by sometimes submitting despite the fact that we may feel that we don't understand or that it doesn't make sense or that it goes against everything kind of that we know to be true. Rav Soloveitchik in Family Redeems captures this idea beautifully when he says that the miraculous metamorphosis which the body undergoes in its descent from blind compliance with mechanical instincts to purposeful selective conduct is the fount out of which Kedusha uninterruptedly streams. Disciplining the body, interfering with its pleasure-seeking drives, organizing them into a meaningful whole, and relating them to a higher frame of reference by refusing to yield to the powerful push of the flesh, and by resisting the rush of primitive lust, represent the dynamics of holiness. I think that this is one of the key messages of the holiday of Shavuot. We don't have mitzvot hayom. It's a day that's meant to be fed ultimately with our family, eating and singing and laughing and enjoying what it means to have received the Torah. And I think in the time where we had the Mikdash, the Karbanot of the day meant to capture this as well. For us, unfortunately, we're so far from the Mikdash that kind of we read the Karbanot, maybe half paying attention, and don't necessarily think about what the Karbanot were meant to represent. But if you lived in the time of the Mikdash and your family was Ola the Regel, the Karbanot that were being brought in the Beit HaMikdash really captured a large part of what the holiday was about. And there's two interesting and unique things about the Karbanot of Shavuot. One is that we know that we read in Pasuk Zayin in Torah 7 that Mimoshvotechem taviu lechem tnufa, and it says at the end of the pasuk that chametz ta'afena, that the shtei lechem, one of the karbanos that was brought was the shtei lechem that we know was made out of chametz. This is the only time ever that there was a karban tzibor, communal sacrifice that had chametz in it. Unlike the regular mincha that was made just of flour or matzot. Chametz represents leavened bread. Chametz represents something that is richer, which is fuller, which is satisfying. Unlike, again, just the plain flour that was usually brought. And on Shavuot, I think the message is we're reminded that Gashmiut, things that for us may seem so physical, so concrete, so this world, that the whole goal of a Torah life is to take those things and to elevate them, to give meaning to them, to bring holiness into them, not by denying them and not by abstaining from them, but from using them in the most powerful ways. This is also, I think, the message of the Shlamim. In Pasuk Yitzhak, we read at the end that there was a karban Shlamim that was brought. Another unique thing about Shavuot, because also the only time that a karban tzibor was brought as a shlamim. Usually the karbanot that are brought are mostly olod. A shlamim, what does it mean that a karban is a karban shlamim? It means that half of it is burnt, the way that usually the olah, the entire karban, is burnt. But the shlamim, half of it was also eaten by the kohanim, eaten by other people. And the Gemara tells us in Zvachim something unusual about shlamim. It says that ad shelo hukam hamishkan, until there was a mishkan, the end of the line says hakol karvu olod. Everybody only sacrificed olod. And then the Gemara goes on to say, Amar Mar v'hakol karvu olod in shlamim lo. What does that mean? This means they only brought olod, they didn't bring shlamim. The haktiv, it says by Matan Torah, v'yizbachuz v'chim shlamim laHashem parila. They did bring shlamim. Ela ema lakol karvu olod. And Rashi tells us, what does it mean lakol karvu olod? Bein Yisrael, bein Bnei Noach, karvu olod. The Gemara is making the point that before the Mishkan, up until Matan Torah, Bnei Yisrael and all the other nations, they only brought karbanot olod, karbanot that were completely burnt and sacrificed to Hashem. Aval shlamim lo karvu. They didn't bring shlamim and lo karvu lebnei Noach. Umisha'at Matan Torah shenivcharu Yisrael karvu lehem shlamim. Only once there was a Matan Torah, only once the Torah was given down here to us here on earth, did the concept of shlamim, of chatzi laHashem and chatzi lachem, come into being. And I think Rav Soloveitchik makes this point beautifully when he says that halacha, the idea of halacha for us is not that the halachic man is not trying to rise up to God and to become some sort of angelic feature, but rather to bring the divine presence into the midst of our concrete world. And holiness, and what we mean when we say holiness, and what happens on the holiday of Shavuot is the descent of God, who no one thought that we could ever grasp in any kind of concrete way. The Shekhinah came down onto Har Sinai, and all of a sudden that mystical, spiritual world became something more concrete and something that was connected to our reality. And I think to end, I'll say that on Shavuot, everybody agrees that Ba'inan Chetzi Lachem, it has to be a day where we feel God's Torah in this world, because the Torah was given down here for us. It's supposed to be something that is human, that's concrete, that's physical, that is meant for human instincts and human nature. And I will end by saying that I think, for me, one of the main goals of Deracheha is exactly this, to bring halachot that are so sometimes difficult to understand, lofty, abstract, and to find a way to give them a human voice that resonates specifically with women, with our communities, in the place where we find ourselves right now. And as we approach Shavuot, so proud and grateful to be part of this important and meaningful project, and I hope that all of us are successful in really feeling that Deracheha, Darchei Noam, that the ways of Torah are pleasant.